Hello, everybody. My name is Chris, and you are watching the Writing Community Chat Show. I am being joined here by the amazing QI Queer Indie Group, and we hope you are doing well. And we are part of the Brooklyn Book Festival, which is absolutely crazy. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hi there.
Fantastic. What we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about why the Writing Community Chat Show exists and why Queer Indie exists and what we do, and then we're going to delve into some questions about the whole indie community and things all involved in writing and books. So please join in and get involved in the chat because we will be asking and answering your questions throughout the show. So welcome. First of all, the Writing Community Chat Show is evolved from my own self-publishing journey and the help the writing community gave me throughout that journey. I couldn't think any way better to give back to that community than creating this show and giving authors a platform and a voice to show and expose their work. So it's a really a platform for them. So this is my way of giving back, and I can't thank them enough for the help they gave me on my journey, which is still happening. So Mario, hello to you. How are you doing?
Greetings, Chris. It's good to be here, and I'm glad you've exposed us all because this is where
You guys.
I can't help that. But how are you doing?
Hey, it's part of your job. So it's great to be here at the Brooklyn Book Festival with all our friends here. And let me tell you a little bit about Queer Indie. It began a little over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half. Anyway, the theme of this is a group of authors who wanted to get queer lit out there, and our theme was radical acceptance. And the more I thought about it, I was like, acceptance is too soft a word. I'm talking radical celebration of LGBTQ+. So we are a consortium of authors, and we have a directory of well over 200 indie authors that identify as LGBTQ+ and allies. So check out our queerindie.com website.
Definitely. It is an amazing website, and I've been on there myself. In fact, Mario featured on there myself, as well as a lot of guests who are supporters of the QI writers group as well. It is fantastic. Please do visit that site, and the links to those sites you'll find in the description. So let's introduce everybody else. Anya Pavel, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Chris?
Fantastic. And you, of course, are an author, a self-published indie author as well.
I'm part of a small publisher. So yes, a small indie publisher is my publisher. And yes, indeed.
Fantastic. AC Merkel, how are you doing, Drew?
Hi.
Hello.
Doing all right. Had to check for a pulse, make sure everything's going good. As we get older, that's how things get, right? Am I okay? Am I sure I'm okay?
Just don't expose yourself too much.
Yeah, leave that to Chris. I mean,
you will let Chris do that. Okay. So yeah, I had a book on the way out. It came out. Halo's like, hey, we're doing this thing, and so Queer Indie happened, and it turned into something bigger than we thought. So
it was quite a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
and speaking of Halo,
there she is.
That's right. She can't be here today, but she's on my shirt. So
yeah, thank you to Halo for setting this up. If you do happen to watch this, we very much do appreciate it and the work and effort you put into this tonight. So thank you indeed. Ross Young, how are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm thoroughly unexposed.
I think you're going to give me some sort of alter ego that these people that may be watching for the first time don't know about.
Chris Agate, the exposer.
Oh, thanks, guys.
It's like the Punisher or the Leveler or one of those movie things.
Yeah,
the exposer.
Let's not get that going. Okay, TT Banks, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Just a little bit well from the last time.
Oh, I think I've improved recently. I think heading out of lockdown has been a crazy thing for everybody, but seemed to be in the right direction, kinda. I don't know. But we're all here together, and that brings me a lot of joy. So thank you guys for being here with me. And are you ready to ask and answer some questions?
Let's do this.
Okay, let's get into them. Okay, so let's have a look at the questions that have been preloaded into the amazing loading machine. And the first one is, what's the biggest risk you've taken in your books, or that you've read in an indie book? Which is a great question. Let's go to Mario to start this off.
All right. Well, this one's a tough one. I guess the biggest risk I've taken my initial risk was to tell the story of my near-death experience, sailing experience, and putting all of my emotions and all of my struggles and bearing my heart to the entire world. So, so much so that when I uploaded it to all of the sites and Amazon and all that, I proceeded to have a complete panic attack. So I guess that would be my biggest risk, just bearing my soul to the public. So
definitely, I mean, that is a massive achievement, and B, it is a big risk. What advice do you have to anyone that has a personal story that may be a sensitive one that they want to share?
Well, I think first of all, you have to be really comfortable with having strangers know that. So yeah, I mean, for me as a school teacher, I have been sharing my story with my students for 30 years or so, and more. And so I'm used to like putting myself out there, but it was very different when putting it in print. But I think just being honest, being authentic, and don't preach to anybody. This is, if you're putting yourself out there, put your story out there as you've struggled it, but don't tell other people that they should do it the same way, right? So really be authentic and don't preach to others.
Fantastic. Same question to you, TT.
What was the question?
Risk.
What is the biggest risk you've taken in kind of books, or that you've read in other indie books?
Well, I think I'll plug Halo here.
Wow.
Halo brings it pretty hard with the visceral, reactionary. Oh my God, I can't believe I just read that kind of shit. Pardon me, was I allowed to say that?
Yeah, swearing.
Okay,
fine.
we're good.
We're grown-ups, yeah.
And I was just shocked and surprised, and I kept reading. So, if you're looking for gritty and terrifying and oh my God, who would even think of that kind of thing? I think that's amazing, and I think everybody probably strives for that when they're writing, to shock and to elicit that kind of emotional feedback from their readers. But Halo's got it.
I don't strive for those same emotions.
Not those same, but
No, I know.
You know what? It really is dark in the best kind of way. And when I'd written my kind of what I class as horror myself at the time, I thought, "Ooh, are people going to find this a bit harsh?" And then I read Halo's book, and I was like, "Wow, I didn't even step on the bus."
You're totally fine. I thought I could never write horror, and then I read Halo stuff, and I was like, I can totally write something that's not this intense. So I think I'm okay.
So when it comes to, this is a great question for anyone, because I still don't know how to answer this myself. When it comes to writing darkness and violence in a story, how do you know where the limit is, or do you just disregard that limit anyway and just go with what your gut says?
Can I keep talking for a second here? Because I do write in the perspective of the killer a lot of the time, and I find that to be epically thrilling. Because it's not something that I would actually want to do, and yet my brain totally goes there, and it's sick and twisted, and I just let it go. And then at the end, I'm like, okay, I don't need that part. We don't need to see that viscera. I think that what is so amazing about Halo's work is that she just left it in. It was like, yes, let's do this. And it was a great decision, amazing decision. Anyway, I'll be quiet now.
Not at all. That's a great answer. AC Merkel, what about yourself? Have you taken a big risk in writing?
Big risk is, well, let's put it this way. We're supposed to be talking about indie innovation. So like this little bitty book is not something that a publisher would ever do.
Okay.
Like it's half size. It's a short story. It was 25, 29 pages. And when you shrunk it, you get this little 50-page mini book. That's the kind of thing I can do because I'm the boss. I'm in charge of my destiny and my future. And how are a bunch of people going to pay $5.50 for this little hard copy of a short story? No, probably not. But it's there if somebody wants it, because I can do what I want. And I think that's why I'm enjoying so much of this stuff. The big risks are, this is also a numbered book in the series. That's a risk too, because it's 30-minute read.
Do you think having the creative freedom as an indie author is like a worry for publishing houses these days, especially with the amount of people going down that route?
No, because I think that I don't think they're worried about us. But on the same token, I could have spent a year looking for an agent or 2 or 3. And in the meantime, people are reading my work and reviewing it and buying it. And sure, I'm not making enough to live off of, but I'd rather have control and a little less money. So I think going indie and self-published like a big risk in itself.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good answer. Anya Pavil, you mentioned an independent or an indie kind of publishing house. Let's talk a little bit about that and what that means as a publisher or as an author.
So I guess my biggest risk was signing my books with my publisher press, because I loved my story and it still needed work. But happily the risk paid off, because they're a small, sci-fi publisher, and they also took my historical fantasy on. So the biggest risk was giving them, rights to what I'd spent a long time writing. So that in terms of,
And how does that feel for an author, giving up those rights? Was it an intimidating process, or were you quite happy in the knowledge that you believed in what they were doing?
I believed what they were doing. So I was very happy. The first offer I got from a publishing house was some 23-year-old girl had set up a publishing house, and there was infighting within 2 weeks, and I hadn't signed anything. But then I saw that and I'm like, So, I'd gotten the contract from Chandra Press, my editor there believed in the vision for the book. So I felt comfortable signing it then. And
so you almost have to have a lot of faith in them as well as they need a faith in yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
and I would add it to that is that, you really do need to do your research, right, Anya? I mean, you need to know what they've published before. You need to know how big they are. You also need to interview them. I think a lot of us indie authors are just desperate to get a deal with a publisher that we don't necessarily do our due diligence, and making sure we have the same vision, and that's important, because you have to work. I mean, contracts have a limit, 5 years or 2 years or whatever it is, but you're going to have to live with these people for that time. So my biggest recommendation is, if you're going with an indie publisher, that you really look at the contract and really feel comfortable about these people and how much experience they have, because that's a huge thing, because anybody these days can be a publisher.
On the flip side of that, like even me, I can be a publisher. On the flip side of that is, if, like for me, where I'm sitting, the indie publisher can't do that much more for me than I can do for myself, unless they're the right one and they're willing to do something and put things in. Like Anya's got a good deal there, but I'm gonna keep all of the profits doing it myself. And so there's the other side of that coin, is like I'm in charge of my stuff, but and also, like, if I'd gotten an indie publisher that wasn't going to promote me, I'd be in the same boat with less money. So,
well, both are viable options, right? I mean, and
it depends on you.
Each of us has to decide what works best. I mean, I'm doing both because I think they're both very valid and exciting. But it really depends on the person, the creator. We haven't heard from Ross. Let's see. Ross, you have a lot of opinions on this. I know that.
Feel free to
a
cut
lot of
in.
opinions. Yes. I think for me, I'm indie published only, and I did it's a long time ago. I published my first book, Dead Heads, and at the time I did look at querying a little bit. I quickly got bored of that. I know bored of it is the right word, but I quickly gave up. And it was about 10 years ago, and that was around about the time that KDP was really coming in. None of the tools as such that are available now, and certainly marketing and things like that were much more difficult. From my experience, I would say it's a really different world now in terms of what an indie author can do for themselves. Having said that, I do think that there's a certain element about indie publishing, which means that it's a really good way for people to get books out there that may not get picked up by a traditional publisher or even a small publisher. And that's the important thing is how offbeat your work can be by not going with a traditional publisher. And I think that some people like Anya and Mario have been very, very lucky to be involved with some people who really believe in their books. But I do think there's a lot of books out there. And I don't personally think that my books would be very appealing to most publishers, certainly no big publishers. And I'm quite lucky that I can do a lot of things myself. But having said that, if someone came along to me and said, hey, here's a 6-figure book deal, then I would gnaw their arm off at the shoulder. And you know, I'd call them daddy if they want me to. I don't care.
There's a big difference between independent and big publishers.
So,
yeah.
But Ross, you know, that ties back into, you know, the risks you've taken with your own writing, right? I mean, you should chat a little bit about that.
Yeah. Okay, Mario, I'm getting there. I think in my I do write some quite strange stuff, and I think that it is a strange genre that I write in, and it is mainly humor, and humor is quite hard to sell, as well. And I think that that's what led me down the path to go down the indie route, and I like having that control over things and writing about something different. On the original question, which was about the biggest risk, I actually think that Mario is a great example of someone who's taken a really big risk. I don't think I'm actually brave enough to write that much from my real world life experience, if that makes sense. I think that takes a huge amount of courage, and I think I lack it. But I'm in admiration of that. In terms of one silly risk that I'm going to throw out there, of something that I did, I wrote the blurb for my sequel in my book from 10 years ago without having a book. And that was the stupidest thing I think I've done to date. It caused a few issues, just a few minor issues. But yeah.
I've got some comments from the chat there. Linda says, Drew is the boss elbow cough.
Hi, Linda.
She will be self-published around November, December, no later than December. And I said, do you feel that you need a deadline for yourself? She replied saying, I just need the deadline to push myself to stay on track again, which is an indie author privilege, I guess. The deadline is flexible. There you go. Which if I need, I can adjust, and that's fantastic. Right. Linda says she's also put herself published, and Eric says Mario is my inspiration to self-publish.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Eric and I teach together, and he's cool. We've started our writing journey together. So, yeah.
And here I thought it was a random fangirl.
You
ruined it for me, Mario.
Is there going to be a place in the live stream where we can ask specific questions?
Absolutely.
Yes, there will be. There will be.
Go for it.
And they're doing it for a school project. And they have a question for Ross Young. Ooh.
Ooh.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's move on. Let's stay within the self-publishing world, but let's talk about marketing. For example, you mentioned it kind of, you have the freedom as an indie author to do kind of what you want, but you also have to take that responsibility on yourself.
Yes, you do.
Who out of here loves that? Who hates it? Who struggles? What's the story?
Oh, I hated it more starting out because I felt like I had to do every little writer's lift thread on Twitter and each and everything. And then I had to keep up with all these thousands of posts that were coming in with my name on them. And at this point now, I'm financing some paid advertising with an author service that I do for people. So I'm working, getting paid, and using that money. So my writing world is completely, in a way, funding itself. Now the books aren't funding themselves, but the author service on top of that is funding everything. So with that going on, promotion's a whole lot better. I don't have to spend as much time on it because I'm doing art for money and putting that back into the books, which is awesome.
Right. So it's good. It would be good for our audience to know what that is. Drew does incredible animations of our book covers, and you could explain it a little bit better, Drew. But a lot of us use them. They're striking and they're eye catching, and they're really good for our advertising.
Thank you. But it's just, I learned how to use, I saw an animated book cover for the first time and said, oh, that's fun. I want to play with that. So I did the research, and I've got 6 or 7 apps that I use to make that happen, plus my photo editor that I need and my background remover that I need. And it's become a big kind of more complicated thing than it was when it started. And I think people come back to me because I do each one kind of, I don't just throw a filter on top of it or a screen. Each one's like custom, and I spend a lot of time, and I have a unique vision, and that's why I'm here. So if you want to see any of those, I do have a gallery on my acmerkel.com site.
So let me ask this question then, because we all know as a self-published indie author, the return you get from selling books isn't exactly lucrative, unless you're selling hundreds and thousands of books. And it can be kind of the same when it comes to traditional publishing. Do you think that having external income sources is kind of the way to build yourself as an author to make it more possible to succeed in that way?
I think that's very important. Sorry, that was all I wanted to say.
Can I just throw in there that I think that maybe we're ignoring the fact that the majority of published authors that have gone the traditional route, that very few of them are able to make a full-time living off their writing anyway. It's actually, I don't know what the percentages are, but it's actually a much smaller percentage than most people realize. So for an indie author to be able to make a full-time living off writing would be pretty amazing. And so I would be interested to know what the percentages are, to be honest, in terms of indie authors doing it versus traditional published authors doing it. TC, what are you laughing at? Are you laughing at me? What are you laughing at?
We're just picking something up in the chat.
Y'all aren't even paying attention. That's nice.
I think
we just caught Drew having a little puff in the corner. That's all.
Just Ross, though.
Yeah, here.
Oh,
I quit smoking, and now I've got this robot cigarette, which goes really good with being a sci-fi fantasy author.
It's like cyberpunk cigarettes.
Yeah, cyberpunk cigarette right here. But I couldn't take the real smoke anymore, but I'm trying to be discreet. But
Anyway, okay. Who's got a favorite part of being an indie author? Anyone?
Yeah, let's open that up.
These people right here are my favorite part of being an indie author.
Aww.
See how you are.
Yeah, it's true though. I mean, I would not have the confidence to keep doing this without all of you folks that support and lift me up and push me to the front. My imposter syndrome would have kicked my ass back to the curb a long time ago, especially Halo, who's not here.
Yeah.
And Ash.
How about you, Anya?
I have to agree. The community is really, really wonderful. And I think also just the variety of literature that I've been exposed to, because I like to read some traditional published things, but I find so much indie stuff that is at the same quality, if not surpassing. So the fact that I was able to find so much more literature in addition to the community, I'd say that's invaluable.
Don't you find that being part of this writing community that you've had more, and this is to everybody, impetus or desire to read books by people you know that you've met in the writing community? Why do you think that's so?
Because you know, as you're talking to people and learning about them, you go, oh, I like this person. I'll probably like their book. I like this weird, you know, like Ross is a good example. Ross has a quirky personality. No, really. Ross has this way of like coming into a conversation and taking it over and making everybody laugh. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I have to agree with that, though, because I would never, you know, Ross's book, the first cover he had, it looked like it was all about death. And I was like, yeah, I'm not into death. And then I got to know his personality and his humor. And I'm like, well,
Joe!
He's got to be that funny in his writing. And it was absolutely the truth. Like, I laughed my head off throughout that book.
This speaks volumes, though, and we kind of all mentioned this in the past. Having an author brand is crucial to development. Having a personality is also equally important. Ross, why do you think that, again, as was kind of mentioned, you know, your cover kind of pictured death, but may have put certain people off, but your personality drew them in. How can you give someone advice who is writing that doesn't quite have their personality out there just yet?
I think it's a really good question. It's a really hard question. I'm actually, I consider myself quite socially awkward. But when you've got to chatting to some people for a little while, you can come out of your shell a little bit and reveal a little bit more about your personality. And I think that a lot of authors and reflecting themselves through their work is a difficult thing. So, I mean, Titi was saying earlier that she writes through the mind of the killer quite a lot of the time in her work, but we're not going to assume that she's a psycho killer. We've got no evidence. But you know, it's the same with somebody like Halo Scott, who we've mentioned several times, who we all adore Halo, but we wouldn't imagine that the person that we meet when we speak to Halo is the same person that necessarily writes what she writes. So I think that it's an interesting thing, and does the personality of an author sell their books, and should the personality of an author sell their books, is an interesting question, because there are lots of works out there by authors who have some quite questionable personal beliefs, but their works are very impressive. So my advice would be, just don't be a dick.
That is the best life advice ever.
It really is. I mean, I
think it's a good motto. I don't know if it's advice. I think it's just don't be a dick.
Unless your name's Richard, and then you might not have a choice.
Man, I saw somebody's name the other day. It was Richard Fuchs, and I was just like, I just made like 50 jokes, and I was like, I know that's probably not how he says his last name, but his parents were bad.
There's people. A very famous theologian with that last name.
There's a comment come in from one of our fellow indie authors. I'm going to have to put it on screen and read it to you, Ross. It says, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, it is Friday night. I've had a few rums. I am drunk, madly in love with you all, except Ross. And I'm happy to be here." And that's from Connor. Hello, Connor. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you on board.
And that's good, because I thought it was me Connor didn't like for a while.
Yeah. But then to bring you back up, Joanne says, "Great advice, Ross," in capital letters.
That's right.
What we're going to do, we're going to jump into part 2 of the story, the show, and then we'll move on. And before we finish the show, we'll have questions from you guys, so please have them ready. Just off the back of that,
can I just quick question. Where is it? Dick Sweat.
Yes,
Linda,
yeah.
are you by chance from, I don't know, New Hampshire?
Mm-hmm.
She had a
I'm guessing
teacher at school named Dick Sweat, no lie.
that was the name
Oh,
of a
wow.
that was running for, I don't know, Congress or Senate forever in New Hampshire. I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
It's
wow.
special. Okay,
Now
I'll be
you're
quiet.
trying
That's
to
right.
escape.
So, like, if you're ever going to have children, if anybody chooses to have children, just know that when you name them, it lasts their entire
life.
Yeah, they can change it. But anyway, okay, so we're talking big and brave ideas, bold and brave ideas, not big ideas, even though that's what I said. Okay, we kind of mentioned this a little bit, but how do you handle difficult topics in your books? Even going as far as researching and interviews. Anyone have any advice for that?
I would like to hear from Anya on this, because she does deal with some very serious issues in her books.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, sorry if I was distracted. There was a flying ant going through the room. It looks big, but so if I get up and do this, then you know what, it happened.
That's a viral sensation video right there.
Yeah. In any case, good question, Ross. I had a sensitivity reader for my historical fantasy novel because I wanted to make, first of all, it's not something that's own voices, and I even questioned if I should write it at first. So what I did then was I had a sensitivity reader go over it and give me feedback. And, you know, it was something where I also have to accept that people are going to have different reactions for it. So, and that's okay. But I also try to keep a lot of, you know, violence, etc., off screen just because of the nature of the story.
Anya, for someone that doesn't know, maybe listening, what is a sensitivity editor?
So a sensitivity reader is someone who, so for example, if I was looking for a queer sensitivity reader, it would be someone who identified as such and who was part of that, who had that identity to give me feedback, you know, who, I'm butchering this, but in any case, someone who can give me feedback that I myself can't see. And so a sensitivity reader looks for things that I might have missed, mischaracterizations I might have had. And so I think it's a valuable thing to have someone look at the work, because the last thing I would want to do is treat something insensitively, but I might not know. So it's not a free pass. It's not just, oh, I have a sensitivity reader, this means it's fine. It's not that. Because people have different reactions to things, but it's a way to make sure that I'm not, you know, exploiting something.
Well, yeah, you want somebody who can speak from the I perspective, right? You know, and who can actually, you know, evaluate what an author has done that can't speak from their own voice in that particular situation. Right. And obviously, we're, you know, it's not that we just write about our own experiences, right? I mean, clearly, Titi would be the, you know, murderer among us, and so, but we, you know, we want people to be able, we want to be able to write about everybody, but we also want not to offend, and you know, so that's why a sensitivity reader is so important. So.
Linda has a great question that's just come in there. Do you think having a specific warning for those readers at the start of a story would help? It is a great question because a lot of people wouldn't know that. Does anyone have a suggestion for that?
You know, I'm not a big fan of content warnings because I think it can give things away. But at the same time, I'm not writing anything really heavy. I try to keep it a little bit lighter. But, you know, I almost thought about it for the sequel to Her Name is Murder, London Calling, because there's a good bit of talk about miscarriages in there. But in the, you know, in the blurb, there is a mention of that it has to do with Anne Boleyn. So I think people who know the history of that will already kind of know that's in there. So it's kind of like, you know, I did kind of give it away enough in the blurb so that you might, you know, it mentions that it's in there in the blurb. I wrote it into the blurb. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, maybe some of us should have it and some of us shouldn't. And then, okay, somebody save me because I'm fumbling now.
No, I think that's a great answer.
Yeah, TT, you write about a bunch of different things. I'm curious about your thoughts on this.
I think that trigger warnings are important, and I've definitely considered adding them to book cover or two. But mainly, it's kind of like when you go into a movie theater and it says rated PG-13, may include, adult language, blah blah blah. You're not saying anything explicitly like so and so suffers a whatever. I don't want to get into specifics, but you don't want to say exactly what it is, but they have they have very generic warnings for like sexual violence or just violence, swearing, rough language, etc., etc. There are reasons for those by the FCC, I think. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that the publishing community doesn't already have that, honestly. When you go to self-publish and you're on Amazon, let's just say, it asks whether or not it is 18 plus. And I always, if there's any swearing in there, I mean, I know you can have swearing or whatever in a PG-13, I put yes. I mean, my books all have lesbian sex in them, so it's always a yes. But I just think that if you're going to throw in an F-bomb or two, or anything that is outside the norm for, let's say, PG, you should probably be aware of that.
Well, Ross is, Connor has just asked a fantastic question. And he says, movies always have age ratings, maybe books should too. Does anyone agree with that?
I mean,
I agree with that. I think it's important to know, and we do in a certain respect, middle grade, adults, we do have those ratings. I mean, it's not so much a rating, but telling us what level the book is aimed for. So in that regard, we already have it.
I think more like, on the cover of a DVD of a film, you've got the 18 stamp. Do you think that sort of thing should be on the front of a book?
I don't.
No, I'd make my covers ugly.
Yeah, it really would.
And I spend a lot of time on these things. I don't want any like parental guidance on there.
Plenty of room at the bottom on the back, bro. Come on now. A little thing that says NC-17 would not kill anybody here.
And then there's the other thing is I'd have to like think about what my book falls in if I had to do that for myself.
Well, I'm just thinking back to the old Halo story with how graphic that was. That surely could do with a stamp on there saying 18 plus.
I think that there are trigger warnings at the beginning of that.
They're definitely in the blurb.
Yeah.
On Amazon, I'm pretty sure that it has like the FYI, this is 18 plus. So if you're in Ingram, I believe that is also the same thing.
But there's also the fact that like I haven't clicked that for anything. You know what I mean? Like,
don't be saying that on air, Drew.
While I don't want to directly market this to 12-year-old boys, obviously. I don't think that like putting an age restriction on it, because what if it says 18 plus and somebody wants to read it 17? I don't think we should keep it from them.
Yeah, but isn't that up to the person purchasing it and or the parent purchasing it, just like when you would bring your kid to the movie theater? I'm sorry, I don't want to get like too deep into it here, but like if you allow your 17-year-old to go see an R-rated movie, that's your business.
But at least you know what you're getting into.
Ross, you were going to say something?
Yeah, Ross.
Sorry, Ross.
I was just going to bring it back to a really, really boring side of it, which is the logistics of it. And the reason why it doesn't exist is because with films, we have these agencies who will slap a rating on a film. Mm-hmm. We don't have an agency who is going to read every single book out there to put a rating on it. There's just a lot more books than there are films. So in reality, there is no way that we would have a fair measure of what should be classed as this, that, or the other. And that's why it doesn't exist. I don't think that it's a wrong thing or a right thing to have a warning on a book. And I actually think it's quite a good thing quite a lot of the time. very graphic things. There have been occasions when I've read a book and it's affected me far more than I expected to. And I think that's more the issue, is if it comes out of nowhere and something blindsides you. If you are reading a certain type of book, you expect a certain type of thing in there. And we can all get that from the genre, from the blurb. Within the first 20 pages, you know what sort of thing you're going to be reading. Is there going to be brutal stuff going on or not? But if you're reading, the Care Bears go for a picnic, and then halfway through it, there's, a horrible genocide of all the Care Bears and all the female.
You could have just said Care Bear or orgy, man.
We got a question, Ross related, from RML. The first, Mr. Young, how has your career evolved since you started writing until now? Can you answer that?
Not very significantly. Would be a fair thing to say. I write more. I aim to put more out there. I think that from when I began, I've always written, so it's a tough question, but when I began putting my writing out there, it was nice to see other people were interested in my writing, and that's encouraged me to write more. And I would suggest to anyone who is thinking about writing, get people to read your stuff. That was what I was always frightened of. And the second I started to get people reading my stuff, it made a huge difference to me, and I will continue writing. Hopefully people will continue reading it. That's pretty much where I am with things.
Fantastic. CF said in the comments, Rick and Morty already did that in regards to the Care Bears.
Care Bears. That's probably where Ross got it.
I haven't watched Rick and Morty.
Oh, okay, good.
So perhaps you should be writing for them. Definitely.
There we go.
We'll ask.
Care Bears.
We'll ask one more question in this round before we get questions in from you guys. Although we've asked a couple already, so if you have some for any of us, all of us, in regards to writing or personal, maybe get them ready, and we will ask them shortly. One more question from this group. Let's have a little look. Best writing advice you've received versus the worst writing advice you've received.
That's a really good one.
Let's go with TT Banks. Mother.
Best and worst?
Well, choose one.
Choose one. Okay. Worst writing advice was cut this, and it was a fairly explicit sexual scene, which was very pivotal in character development, and it was upsetting to write and probably upsetting to read. But the person that told me to cut it had no right, and I put it back in. So,
the best thing about that was the end.
Thank you.
Love that. Okay, great advice. AC Moon?
What about you? You haven't answered many of these questions, Chris.
I was just looking at Ross's sign. Sorry. Okay, so best writing advice. Thank you, Mario, for that question.
Yes, thank you, Mario. I don't want to talk about writing advice.
You know me too well. Okay, the best writing advice for me would be, when it comes to the first draft, completely go with your heart, let it go, and just get the story out. Don't think about going back and editing chapter by chapter, paragraph by paragraph even. Get the first draft out on the page, no matter what state that is in, and then go back and look into it time and time again, because that for me is a real asset to when it comes to the creative flow, if that makes sense. And I think that's really helped me.
I would agree with that, Chris. That's one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten. Just write what's in your heart. Go back later, throw it out, revise, whatever, but just keep on writing. Anya's shaking her head. What do you think, Anya?
I agree, and I was going to jump in with some worst advice that I've gotten. And some of the worst advice when I was querying was, don't try to write this type of fiction now because the market is not going to bear it, type of thing. And I was like, well, I want to write this. I have this story. If a million people don't buy it, that's fine. But, the suggestion that I should try to write solely for the market, that was the worst advice I had gotten. So I wanted to jump in there, because if people are watching this and you have a story, and Drew has touched on this too, but if you have a story that you want or need to tell, and even if you don't have, it's not going to be a huge market success, if you still want to tell that story, then that's okay.
How do you think the impact of say a publisher saying it's not the right time for that kind of story has on the indie publishing world? Because as an indie publisher, the times don't matter. If you feel that story's good enough, it's good enough. How do you think that mindset of a publisher is? Anyone?
Oh, well, you know, on that same, down that path, it's like, oh, it's not the right time for that story. But, you know, I've been flogging that book for coming up on 2 years now. Her Name is Murder. I've got time. I'm not limited to say, hey, like if that doesn't do so many copies in the traditional publishing world in 8 months, 10 months, they're not going to do anything else with you. It'll be done. And for me, like I see that book as a success. You know, I've got 70 reviews. I've got, you know, people have read it. People are still picking it up, even though I've made it free to get people to read the others in the series now. But like people are still picking it up. People are still reading it. The timelines of of traditional publishing just blow my mind sometimes. It's like, and the big ones more than the small ones. It's like, oh, it's going to take us 2 years to get it out, and then you better make it hit in 3 months. Okay. I think I'll stay away from all of that as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, let's, you know, look, everybody's got their own thing. I mean, let's not diss people who want to go down that road. We need to give everybody their due on that. And I think it really does. I think as long as you're writing your passion and you find an outlet for it, then that's good. Go down that outlet, right? Go down that path. You know, I definitely, like for my new book, Letters from Italy, I really wanted it to be, have a wider audience. And one of the advantages of having a traditional publisher is that you can get reviews, editorial reviews. And those editorial reviews don't, you know, people won't look at them. Newspapers won't look at indie publishers for that. Which is unfortunate because we have a lot of great stuff. But, you know, already for this book I have coming out in February, I have 6-7 editorial reviews, you know, which, you know, I wouldn't have gotten if I had gone down the independent publishing or self-publishing for that one. So let's not be bashing anybody here.
No. And I wasn't. I was just, you know, for me and the other way. And I was saying bigger trad publishers, you know, but like I had reviews before the book came out too. And I'm self-published. So, I mean, it's not like.
Well, editorial reviews have to come from publishers.
Oh, you're talking about, press reviews.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, my bad.
Yeah. So for example, an indie publishing house would find blog tours, for example, and ways to market these books. Do you think it's any different from you learning to do that yourself?
It is. They have more, you know, it depends. All right. So if it's really tiny and not a really good one, like the one Anya talked about, the first one that she didn't go with, and then I've had some experiences as well. But a really good indie house has many connections with the press, and you know they send it out to a number of different people and guide you along the way. So you know it is, if, as Ross said, most of us have full-time jobs elsewhere, right? I don't think anybody here you know is writing completely on their own in that regard. But you know, to have people helping you along the way, and it's always a partnership. It's never just the publisher. The author always has to partner with the company to sell. And I think, you know, bringing Ross's question up, you know, getting your personality out there, you know, and people follow an author, whether that's good or not, you know, but they do follow somebody who they like, you know.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left. What we're going to do now, guys, if you're watching this right now, please send a load of questions into us, which we will try and answer. If you have a specific question, please make sure you address it to this specific person. For the group, please let us know if it's for the group, and we will get those done in the last 10 minutes of the show. So here it goes. Okay, we have one or two questions in there, and we have some spares preloaded if we need them. In fact, let's go with a preloaded question first, because I'm sure some questions will come in. Let's have a look. From Tanwi Adar, who we had on the show recently. Have you always had a vivid imagination? And let's send that out to Anya. Oh, it's great.
You're muted.
Thanks. There we go. Yes, actually, because I used to get really bored during church, so I would, when I was forced to go, so I would imagine stuff. So yes, I developed it as a way to entertain myself as a child out of necessity.
Fantastic. Titi.
Vivid imagination, absolutely. And I'm sure it's because from a very young age, I did read all kinds of books, and generally they were much too old for me. No commentary there. But yeah, they were formative. And yeah, vivid imagination, sure, absolutely. Bring it on, baby.
Fantastic. Let's jump to another question. Another one
You
for
didn't
Ross.
ask me.
Oh, sorry, Mario.
Mario writes real stuff.
Mario,
So,
You gotta ask Drew.
how vivid is your imagination? Let's go around the table with it. Let's go.
this is very, very quickly. Like, I was always one as a kid who, like, something would happen and there'd be this repartee and somebody would pick on me and I wish I didn't have anything to say. And then I go back into my imagination and say, well, this is what I would have said. So like dialogues and how I replayed everything back so that, like, one of my favorite things to write right now is dialogue, and especially dialogue where people are fighting.
I understand you completely there. It's like when someone walks past and shouts something, you went, yeah, funny one. And then 10 minutes later, you think, I should have said that. I should have said that. Nightmare. AC, imagination, vivid or not?
Since like probably a third of my reviews say something about my vivid imagination, I probably have too vivid of one because of all the wacky stuff that comes up in my books. So I'm definitely out there, and probably Ross doesn't want to admit it, but I'm as out there as Ross is.
Ooh.
I'm not shying away from that, definitely.
Okay. Yes. Let's have a little look for some more. Chelsea. Let's do Chelsea's question. What would you do if you met Nicolas Cage in person? Ross.
Sorry, Tanwer Dar.
Firstly, we have to consider whether or not he is real, and whether or not he's a person. Can you really meet the Cage in person? Would it not be more like standing in front of deity? It's not an easy question to answer.
That is
I don't know.
the great
I probably
answer.
know.
It's not like standing in front.
At the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where everyone's faces melt.
So you think we've imagined Nick Cage?
You don't imagine him; he imagines us.
Oh.
So I might have
That
an
was deep.
inside question here that if someone knows who this is for, perhaps the answer, but it might be for Halo and she's not here. So let's have a look. From Paul Doc Lafferty, did you find the jelly beans? ?
I think that's for Halo.
Okay, no inside joke coming out there. Okay, let's have a look. I can ask this question. Question for Mr. Young. Do you think comedy books need to be given a content warning, even if the topics are mentioned in the comedic manner? Follow up, why do you suck so much?
I'm going to answer the first part of that question, and while I consider the second part of that question. I have struggled with that, to be honest, because the nature of what I write about is quite dark, but it's dealt with in a really, really silly way. But on the other side of that, it's pretty obvious what I'm writing about. You know, it's pretty clear on the blurb and on the covers and everywhere else that I'm not writing about the Care Bears, although we all know that is fraught with disaster as well.
I don't know. You do write about stuffed T-Rexes, so
that's true. Actually. It's a difficult one, and actually, like, joking aside with Connor, it is something I've struggled a lot with, and I don't know the answer. I'm still thinking about it.
Okay, let's have another look for another question. Let's go from here. Lalai Love. How do you juggle your life and writing? Which is a question that a lot of people who are getting into the world of writing would perhaps need some advice on. So does anyone have advice for that?
Do it.
Right now, I'm doing a really great job of lifing and not writing. I have had a lot of changes in the last little bit since I've written 3 books. So I don't know, you guys. I think that you have to carve out time. I mean, I do find time to write like an outline and then get started, but I also am one of the types of people that likes to write when I'm at a cafe, and COVID has not really been gentle with my ability to get out there very much. So I'm hoping that dies down and I get to go enjoy a brouhaha elsewhere.
I think I actually want to answer this one. Mario, if that's okay with you.
I would like that, actually,
Yeah.
Chris.
I think for juggling life as an author, if you're getting into this for the first time, it really isn't just about you. It really does come into play, and you have to think about your family and your friends, because it is a big sacrifice for you all. So just if you're going to go into that journey and you have a busy family life, just be prepared to let them know ahead of time. Look, this is going to take up a few hours, maybe every night or a couple of times a week, and you need that commitment and the support from them, because you'll have the time where you are feeling tired and maybe a bit worn out and maybe not that enthusiastic yourself, and you might need their support too. So just take that into consideration.
I think that's really good advice, Chris.
Yeah.
Because it is a sacrifice, right? You know, you need to carve out time for all of this, and it has to fit with all the other things we have in our lives, right? So,
Yep.
And it's never going to be a true work life or writing other life balance. I've tried for a while, and sometimes it works, other times it just doesn't. And I've kind of come to accept that, if that makes sense.
yeah. That's why one of the earlier pieces of advice people give is, you know, write every day. Well, not everybody can write every day, right?
Nope.
I don't know. Does anyone here write every day? Okay. And we're all published writers.
It
Authors,
can't. It can't. I mean,
Huh.
work, promote, have time for things at home. Yeah, you can't do all that.
Right.
Okay. We can perhaps fit one question in. We've got 1 minute,
Every day.
1.5 minutes left, and let's
Woohoo!
send this to. Let's finish off with Ross. Answer this question for us. Who else has had problems with creativity during COVID? Does anyone have that issue? Ross, did you have that issue?
I would say that it was 50-50. I had a little bit more time. I hit a lot of blocks. In some ways, having more time can make being creative more difficult, because if you're anything like me, that just means you've got a million different ideas, and you go like, wow, I've got all this time, I better do all of them, and therefore will achieve nothing. And I actually think that there are a lot more blocks than there were opportunities to take that time. And I'm quite annoyed with myself, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if anyone else is feeling that, but I'm kind of pissed that I didn't use that time better when it was available.
Very, very, very quickly, RML that first said, it's for a school project. Mr. Young, how did your cultural background influence your work? If you can get a very quick answer to that.
Okay, I moved around a lot when I was very, very young, so I picked up a lot of different cultures, and I think that does work into my writing a little bit. But I'm actually from the north of England, and we have a very dark sense of humor around that area, because it's quite a depressing area sometimes. So it all falls together, and that's why the dark humor comes out, and a lot of stuff about death and things like that, because I know a lot about different world religions as well. Okay.
Fantastic. Guys that you're watching, thank you so much for joining in. Please check out the description for the links to the Queer Indie Group and myself, the Writing Community Chat Show, and everybody who featured on the show. We can't thank you enough for letting us be part of this amazing festival. And each one of us, try and support us if you can. We're all on the same journey. So thank you guys. A lot of love from us.
Thank you
Bye,
very
everybody.
much, Chris. Thank you, everybody, on behalf
Bye,
of
guys.
Queer Indie. And
Love you guys.